All right. Peace and greetings, YouTubers. So, Malcolm Jamal Warner. First off, wow. I mean, I'm still kind of sitting in it because I'm kind of still reacting to the news because it just happened, but wow. My God. You know, it's bad enough we're in this very chaotic era where every day is a new extremity. Every day you're reading about something crazy, right? It's to the point where you wake up and you're like, okay, please let today act like it got some sense. Because yesterday was tripping, so was the day before, so was the week before, so was the month before. This whole year, especially if you live in the United States, we've been going through it over here. So you expect to wake up and read some news about some more tariff nonsense or something else about these planes, but to wake up, well, it wasn't even waking up, I was already up, right? I was at work. But to get off of a meeting, and as I'm getting ready to go to lunch, I read that Malcolm Jamal Warner has passed away. I'm like, what? I think I probably said like, what, 30, what? What? You don't even have words. You just kind of, what? Because it's random. So random. This is random like being at your favorite restaurant. And maybe you're 3 bites away from finishing whatever's on that plate. And then out of nowhere, a car crashes into the restaurant because they were in a high-speed chase. That's how just off the Richter this is to me. Like, this was not on the bingo card. And it wasn't ever going to be. But man. And I think what it is, there are people who, when you think of them, they just immediately bring you joy. There are certain public figures, actors, musicians, athletes, public figures, authors, people who, every time you think of them, you have nothing but good thoughts. You just think of moments where they brought you euphoria. You think of just so many great upstanding things. And to me, Malcolm Jamal Warner was one of those people. And I think especially when we're just talking about how, you know, because sometimes people are always like, why do people always get so connected to these celebrities? People don't know them. You know, people just love to be miserable. I think people forget that even though we don't know these people personally, these people, to an extent, because of what it is that they shared with us through their art or through their work or through whatever it was that they did that was distributed to the world, it becomes a part of our daily experience. So when it comes to music, you remember hearing certain songs from certain artists while you were on that family road trip, or while maybe you were driving for the first time, or when you were on the subway going to that job interview. You remember the song that was playing as you were finally walking into that office. Like, you remember certain things. Even when it comes to television and movies, you remember going on that first, you know, outing as a teenager to that movie theater on that first date. You remember what was on the screen. Same thing with television. You remember what you and your family used to sit and laugh and watch, or you remember what you guys would recite at the cafeteria table the next day. And so when it comes to somebody like Malcolm Jamal Warner, I truly feel that he was a part of so many of our upbringings. Even for me, because technically I was not even old enough to really be a part of what you call that Cosby generation. I was still alive when the show was on air, but I was so young. I was 4 when the show ended. However, I will say, because I do think, especially when we're talking about the Cosby Show, and we're not going to just only contribute his existence to that show, but I do want to talk about it for a second. I will say there are definitely 3 generations that were raised on the Cosby Show. I feel like for Gen X, that's their teenage years. For millennials, older millennials, that's their childhood. For younger millennials, like myself, I think the Cosby Show, we're a part of that syndication run, right? So like I said, I was 4 when the show ended, but I was old enough to be around for the syndication years when it was still on TV every day anyway. So you still grew up with it and you still ended up seeing every single episode. And I think some of the older Gen Z are in that same experience. And so, you know, I just think when people think of somebody like Malcolm Jamal Warner, they think of Theo. They think of their childhood. They think of those episodes. They think of that shirt. They think of Justine, if you remember Justine. Like, they think of all these different moments. And really, when you put it into context, especially for Gen X, that would have been those growing up as the Cosby Show was really running through its peak run, you have to think back to 1984 and what was on television. This is before we had a million options for things that we could consume. This is before the 50,000 streaming services and the 100,000 channels on cable that we pay too much money for. This is back when everybody didn't even have cable. Most people were still only watching the major networks, right? So most people only had about 3, 4, 5 channels, maybe, max, right? ABC, NBC, CBS, PBS might have been one of them. If you were lucky, you might have got another channel here and there, and then, you know, you need the cable for CNN. So I say all that to say, there are so many who, again, Theo was that first time people got a representation of themselves, because outside of other shows like, I'll say Different Strokes, Benson, if people remember that show, Sanford and Son, Give Me a Break, Webster, there weren't a lot of shows that centered on the black family, especially in the kind of capacity that they were presented. There were shows, but there weren't a lot. This is the era where everybody kind of watched the same thing. Collectively, everybody had the same experience when it came to what people were entertained by. And so somebody like Theo was just so commonly known by everybody. And so I think that's one of the reasons why this really just has people just caught off guard. Like, what? What's so wild, too, my earliest memories of something like the Cosby Show, because like I said, I was 4 when it ended, but I do kind of remember it being on TV before, watching those syndication reruns. When I was that age, for some reason, I thought the Cosbys and the Jacksons were one big family. And it was because, like, when I'd see somebody like Sabrina LaBeouf and Lisa Bonet with the big curly hair, then I'd see, like, LaToya Jackson with the big curly hair. I thought all of them were sisters and were all related. And oddly enough, for some reason, I thought David Alan Grier was in that family, too. I don't know why. To me, when I'd see the Jackson brothers, because this is that era when they were always doing big press conferences, for some reason, I always would just picture him next to, like, Jermaine and Jackie. I don't know what was going on, but I was, like, 4 or 5. Give me a break, y'all. And so I just had all of them mixed together. So when I would watch some of those Cosby episodes, I'd be waiting for, like, Michael Jackson to come out in some moments. But I think what it is that people connected with a show like Cosby was that it was joy. It was centered around black joy. It wasn't something that was heavily traumatic. They definitely had some episodes that covered heavier topics, but it was always presented in a way where you felt good after the show ended. And I think generationally, that's one of the reasons why the show and the characters are still beloved today. Wow. Totally caught off guard. And I know some people have been having a conversation about swimming and this, that, and the third. Again, we don't have all the details. Like it's been reported, he was in Costa Rica. He unfortunately drowned. He was 54 years old. Everybody's already trying to dissect what happened with the swimming, and people are leading conversations about swimming. We can have those conversations, but I do want people to also understand nuance and understand, especially if this is a conversation about riptides or being swept away, even the best swimmers, when Mother Nature decides to Mother Nature, humanity cannot really fight it. I'll say that. And it's crazy. I just finished reading the Tina Knowles book, and there's a segment in the book where she talks about, her having an experience where, again, she got swept away from a riptide. And she was a great swimmer. It was to the point where the Coast Guard had to come with the helicopter and come get her. And so I do want people to kind of, at least until all the information comes out, kind of chill on the TED Talks on everything. Can we at least get the details first? Really, really sad. But, one of the craziest things that I've learned, too, I had no idea. He directed probably one of the favorite episodes of many people, in addition to the episode when the family's singing Night and Day and everything like that. But I had no idea. He directed the Night of the Wretched episode. Remember when Vanessa went off to Baltimore to go have big fun, or see the Wretched and have big fun? I had no idea he was the co-director of that episode, right? That is the episode you always see circulating on social media because people keep discovering it, and just a great piece of work. He also co-directed the episode, it was called Nightmare on Stingwood Ave. That's the one where Rudy, this is in the later years, where Rudy was really tired of Olivia, and so she's having that dream where Olivia's just ruining her life, and it's kind of like a musical episode, and it's like Vanessa, Cousin Pam, and her friend Charmaine are like the backup singers, and they're singing through all the episodes as Olivia's just wreaking havoc in Rudy's life. He directed that episode. He directed the episode where Rudy had lied about where they were going with their friends, and they snuck off to the club, and remember the friend had the fake eyelashes that were falling off. I had no idea he had a part of all of that, or he was a part of all of that. And so that's at least with the Cosby Show, but there's so much more that he also contributed. Back in 1992, there was a special called The Truth About HIV, AIDS, and You. And the wildest thing is that they were still showing this special in elementary schools, because this is a special we watched when I was in 6th grade. Right now, I was in 6th grade in about 99, 2000. And so what I always remember about that specific special, because this was, again, you had sex education in the schools. They were trying to teach us about safety. Well, this is the era when they were teaching us abstinence, but they started gradually easing in the conversation of safety because they started realizing the kids are not abstaining, so you might as well teach them to be safe. But what I always remember about this special is when the special was made, it was around the same time Salt and Pepper had Let's Talk About Sex, and then they had Let's Talk About AIDS. But in the special, for some reason, they kept having this segment where it was the kids in the classroom, and they kept singing Let's Talk About Sex. And so for some reason, I just remember being in class, and we kept laughing every time the kids would sing it, because we're like, they can say that? But in that same special, you have a young Ashanti who is in there. We didn't know she would grow up to be Ashanti yet. But you also have, I think, Hydina Broadbent, who for a lot of people that was the first time we were introduced to her. She was the young lady that was born with HIV and became an advocate for HIV and AIDS awareness. Unfortunately, she recently passed away not too long ago as well. But I remember watching that special because Magic Johnson was like the MC. And it's just crazy how all of these things connect, because this was something that he produced as far as Malcolm Jamal Warner. And we know he had production credits on things like The Magic School Bus. My mom's favorite show at the moment was The Resident. And I don't even know if she knows yet. But a lot of people say some of his best acting was on The Resident. He's a Grammy Award winner. You know, he did a project with Layla Hathaway and the Robert Glasper Project. Like, he just has so many things. He's an author. Wow. And, you know, there was Malcolm and Eddie, the sitcom. Woo! My God. I'll say this. I think... I am at a loss for words, y'all, but there's just certain images that will forever be embedded in some of our heads. You're going to always remember that shirt, right? You're going to always remember, well, I remember the Dance Mania episode of The Cosby Show. Nobody remembers that one, but that's the one where he and Cockroach were trying to get on the TV show because they want to dance next to Tina, and then Cockroach got in, but Theo didn't. I remember that episode for some reason, but there's certain images that people will always remember. One of my favorites will always be The Cosby Show opening of season 6 and 7. That's the one where they had that music that was very reminiscent to Junior Walker and the All-Stars, and they had that song Shotgun, and then the opening sounds just like Shotgun. I always remember that opening. It's one of my favorite things just to watch, because one, it just sounded good, and I loved watching all the castmates just dance. Theo was the smoothest in that one. He was real cool right there, right? But like I said, that element of just joy and euphoria, I believe that will be how most people remember somebody like a Malcolm Jamal Warner. The joy that's there, the laughs, the relatability to the character Theo, and the idea of just that coming of age during that era, and how even those stories, they're 40 years old, still to an extent resonate in modern times with people who are coming of age. Really sad. And this is why I say you got to cherish people while they're here, and you also really have to kind of live in the moment, because you just never know. Totally just. Anyway, I gotta sit and soak in it for a minute. Yeah. So share your thoughts. What are your favorite Malcolm Jamal Warner moments? Again, there are so many additional contributions. I really just scratched the surface. The Cosby Show is just what most people know him for, but I mean, his name is tied to so much. So many production credits. I mean, he was even on, what else was he? I want to say he was on Seventh Heaven at one point for an episode or two. He was on Hawthorne, the Jada Pinkett show from back in the day. I mean, we'd be here all day. And then when you add in the movies that he's done, wow, such a loss. That's a weird way to start off a Monday. But anyway, share your 2 cents. I'm out. And hug on your loved ones, people. I think in this current era of chaos, I think sometimes we just have to remind people how much they mean to us, because you just never know. Maybe I'm being super sentimental as well, because technically today is the 10th anniversary of me burying my father, so I'm like, everything is like full circle right now. But yeah, I'm out. Share your 2 cents. Subscribe.